I am the head of trends and tours at WindowsWear. Welcome to our Tuesday edition of WindowsWear Live, in which we tackle different subject matter in the retail world. And today's episode is a fun one because it's very polarizing, and a lot of people have a lot of opinions on it, and none of them are wrong. That's the beautiful thing, right? It is all a subjective thing. So let's go ahead and get started. As always, this is meant to be a dialogue. So if you've been to any of these spaces, if you worked on any of these projects, if you have any feedback or input, feel free to unmute yourself if you're on our Zoom feature, or feel free to ask questions in the chats at Zoom or Facebook or Instagram, any one of our devices that we're currently streaming on. So let's get started. This is interestingly, this is a topic that I thought was going to be a breeze, and it turns out there's actually a lot of depth here. So let's get started on thinking pink. Think pink. So not only is it cute and it rhymes, but there's a lot to unpack. So I talked about this earlier, earlier in the month, I guess, or maybe even last month, when we talked about primary colors, right? When we looked at our color wheel and how we experience color and why we experience color through every different sense, right? But color is absolutely a cultural construct, right? And it's ultimately society that gives color and meaning. And Western culture has a very, very specific opinion on pink, and it's fascinating to me, right? On the one hand, it's associated with sort of femininity and romanticism, and on the other, there is this terminal lack of seriousness. We just don't take it serious as a color. And I want to share with you some psychological properties that we associate with the color pink. These are just words that I read over multiple websites taking a look at descriptors for the color pink. The first one, by and large, is feminine. Feminine. It's the first thing that we think of when we think of the color pink. Other words that came to mind were romantic, delicate, soft, pretty, innocent, sweet, dainty, ladylike, girly, tender, playful, calm, sincere, charming, seductive, artificial, coquettish, enticing, tacky, and vulgar, right? So these, by and large, was like all of the biggest words that people thought of when they thought of the color pink, right? And it is one of the most divisive colors, and it provokes these strong feelings, right? You're either attracted to it or you're repulsed by it. And it's often thought of as like an unsophisticated color, right? We think of black as being the ultimate in sophisticate, right? It's a base color. But it is also the most gender coded color of all of the chromatics. And this wasn't always the case. So we're going to take a quick little look at some history of pink, a mini little history lesson for you. So in Western culture, pink first became fashionable in about the mid 1700s, right? When European aristocrats, both men and women, wore it as a symbol of luxury and class. And pink was considered more appropriate for boys because it was seen as a paler shade of red, and red was always associated with masculinity and military undertones. And around the 19th century, men in the Western world started moving towards darker, more sober colors. So that left a window open for like this bright pastel option to be picked up by their female counterparts. Now, the feminization of pink began around the same time, right? It was this expression of like delicacy and daintiness. I mean, you heard all those words that I just used that describe pink across millions of websites, right? But this is also the first time we see erotic connotations to pink, right? The first time it's hinted at the idea of a woman's nakedness, right? And on the right, you can see this pink corset from the 1880s that did exactly that, right? Lingerie in shades of pink were very common. So were the references to pink's sort of sexual allure. We saw this in art and literature, and it's always directly in relation to the female body, right? And think of that in a modern context. If you think of La Perla, Victoria's Secret, Agent Provocateur, right? They have all built empires off of this exact concept. So then we fast forward to the 1950s, and pink has become very gender coded, and that's thanks to branding and marketing strategies to sell baby clothes in a post World War II moment, right? And this cemented this idea that we have in our heads that pink is for girls, blue is for boys. It's a stereotype that is pervasive to this day. In fact, when I say pink is gender coded, the only time we gender code blue, the only time we can think of blue for boys is when it is in relation to talking about pink, right? So if you go to a baby shower, you're either seeing pink balloons or blue balloons. And if they don't know the gender, oftentimes it'll be a neutral color like green or yellow, right? So it's definitely something that we have developed, and it stayed in our vernacular. And in 1955, Time magazine wrote this article entitled "The Peak Year of Pink," and it focused on the Brooks Brothers' successful incorporation of pink into mainstream menswear as a form of soft masculinity, right? Soft was another word I used to describe pink earlier, right? This idea that a color can be soft, and masculinity is not necessarily a pink thing, right? And this is sort of where we stand today, right? Equally divided on how to feel about this color. Is it feminine? Is it edgy? Is it cool? Is it soft? And the truth is, it can be all of those things, right? And recently, we have seen pink being embraced as a form of protest and a form of rebellion, and it's been politicized in different parts of the world. Pink is the navy blue of India, right? It's used as a base color, and it's currently being co-opted by women who are politicizing their equal rights in a deeply patriarchal society. So they're taking a stand with their use of bright pink that's so pervasive in their culture anyway. And in the US, if anyone went to the Women's March in a couple of years ago, right, protesters exclusively wore pink hats to signify ownership of their sexual and reproductive and social rights. And on the right, you can see images of LGBTQ community wearing the color pink in a million different ways. And historically, pink is a very, very important color to the LGBTQ community, in part because of the appropriation of the pink triangle that was used by Nazis during World War II, which was essentially a sign of homosexual men in concentration camps, which was then transformed as a color for gay liberation and pride, right? So they took the power back in that color and sort of rewrote its history, right? So it's a very complex color. It's not just dainty or pretty. Let's take a look at how some of these ideas translate. That's just a little bit of history, right? How these ideas translate into the retail space, right? So many brands uniquely use color strategy as an integral part of their brand narrative. And I talk about that a lot when you have these specific associations of brands and color. Some of them do it really brilliantly, and some of it's a little more subtle. But because pink has always been associated with sugary sweetness, this makes it perfect for the hospitality sector, and particularly anything that is sweet and dessert, right? Pastries, ice creams, candies, all of these things that we think about. So here's a couple of our first examples in the hospitality sector. On the left, we've got Cha-Cha Matcha, which is a matcha a little matcha shop where you can get your delicious green teas, and it is that quintessential soft pink, right? On the right, we've got Pietro Nolita, which is actually an Italian restaurant. So instead of being sweet, it's a little more, they sell obviously Italian food, and it's savory. So that's sort of breaking in tradition. But what's funny about this restaurant, which I've been several times, is people want to go there, sure, for the food, but mainly for the photo ops, right? There's something so likable and fun about this space that you absolutely want to take a picture when you're there. And that's exactly what I think why they chose this particular shade of pink, because it makes for really dynamic photos and those perfect sort of Instagram moments. And quite frankly, so does Cha-Cha Matcha, right? Like if you've ever been there, there's something very feminine but also neutral about their space. Then we move on to Sketch. So the top right corner is the gallery space at Sketch London. It is a classic tea parlor, right? So they serve high afternoon tea, all kinds of snacks and petit fours and cakes. So again, this idea of a little girl's tea party, right? Something very, very feminine and very light. I've been there personally, and when I walked into that space, I was like, oh, this is a Wes Anderson fever dream. It feels like it was designed for his films. It's absolutely fantastical. And directly underneath that, we see the Eloise at the Plaza. This experience is based on the novel by Kate Thomas, who wrote about a little girl who lived at the Plaza Hotel. And this is this classic interpretation of pink. It's infantilized, right? It's very cute. It's very precious. It's very girly, right? And then to the left, we see the Paul Smith store on Melrose in Los Angeles. And this was a statement, right? The store itself is not necessarily pink, but they really wanted that pink to stand out, and they wanted this to be edgy. And I think it really was. It was, again, another sort of Instagram moment, a moment for people to come to the store. You immediately see this shocking kind of shocking Barbie pink staring at you, and you're either like, wow, that's cool, or you're repulsed, right? There's sort of no middle ground here, but it was very effective in how it lit up the street. Let's move on to the Rosé Mansion. So there's this interesting and weird cliche that rosé is a woman's drink, right? Think of brands like White Girl Rosé or Babe Rosé, or now we have this like concoction called Frosé, right? Like similar to a frozen margarita, right? We've made these drinks really fun and dainty, and that was only pushed by the wine and spirits companies in marketing because of its pink color. If the color of rosé wine hadn't been pink, it would never have been feminized, right? And it's funny that you think of, like, when you think of rosé, of all you think of summer, because it is technically seasonal. You think of fun and frivolousness and lightness. And so the Rosé Mansion basically capitalized on that, right? So they took this idea of drinking rosé with your girls at brunch on a Sunday and created an entire immersive experience on the history of rosé, the way rosé is made. It's what we call like edutainment, right? Education and entertainment at the same time, and we'll see another example of this later on. But it's always interesting that I never thought like, oh, a wine can be gender coded, but when it comes to rosé, by and large, the people that go to the Rosé Mansion, I think it was like 4-to-1, it's women to men, right? For every 4 women that go to the Rosé Mansion, 1 man goes to the Rosé Mansion, and that's primarily because of this idea and feminization that we have around rosé as a wine. And voila. So here we have, so what's interesting is when I showed you that photo of that 18th century man wearing pink, you know, in 18th century France, pink was associated with aristocracy, as I mentioned, but the only time that it was actually female coded was when pink was worn as makeup. And directly in front of you is a perfect, modern day interpretation of that, right? So there is so much. I could have done an entire segment just on packaging and pink packaging. It's everywhere, right? From the Kardashian and the Jenners to Mary Kay, who was quintessential in the 50s and 60s with their pink Cadillacs. They incentivized women to sell their beauty products through incentives like that beautiful pink Cadillac. We have MV here, and Lottery, of course, known for their macaroons, again incorporating that idea of sweetness and desserts into things that are pink and precious. And then we have other elements of that in the hospitality and in the beauty world, right? Acme Studios packaging is absolutely beautiful. It's this sort of soft millennial pink, as is Miu Miu, which is Michele Prada's brand. Victoria's Secret built an empire on pink. We'll talk all about them. So did Barbie, right? Barbie pink became very popular in the 1970s. Glossier, we'll take a look at their workshop or their studio in the next slide. And even Starbucks started to jump on the pink bandwagon, right? Maybe you've had the pink drink. It's on the secret Starbucks menu, right? There's like 5 or 6 drinks that are off menu, but if you know, you know. Dunkin' Donuts, of course, with their pink marketing, they pair up pink with orange. Oftentimes when we see pink, if it's not by itself, it's with another tertiary color. So you'll see pink and orange, or you'll see pink and yellow, or pink and green, right? They pair very well together. Victor and Rolf, and then of course Victoria's Secret pink brand. So these are just some great examples of packaging. Again, there's a million different examples we could have given for this. So the Glossier showroom, so we just saw their packaging, and pink is going through this generational shift right now, right? You've probably heard this term millennial pink. And millennial pink is at the core of Glossier's brand identity and their DNA and their visual identity, right? So they are all about that soft millennial pink. It's a part of their packaging, their stores, their social media platforms. Their staff wear these pink jumpers. So everything is very even keeled, and they have made this pink cool, right? From all of their pop-up shops. It's amazing to see how well they've done. And they're a brand that started online, started on Instagram, and built from their blog following. They compiled this, they've amassed a huge audience and are now one of the biggest beauty brands on the market. And it's just so much because of that pink, right? It's so specific to them. Same way that Tiffany and Company uses their robin egg blue, right? I can't see this pink and not think of Glossier. Then we move on to the Benefit Roller Diner. This is bubblegum pink. Benefit Cosmetics launched their first ever LA-based pop-up shop, and this was to promote their roller lash mascara and their roller liner, and it was inspired, of course, by a 50s style diner. Everything, including the waiters, were dressed entirely in pink and white, so it felt 1950s. It felt very Pink Ladies from Greece. There's something very vintage about it. You took a seat, a waitress came over and gave you a menu. Instead of food on the menu or desserts on the menu, it was cosmetics, and you could choose whatever cosmetics you wanted to try. They would bring it out on a tray, and then you could, of course, purchase those cosmetics. So it was very smart, very fun, and really, really ultra feminine. Charlotte Tilbury Pillow Talk. So this is a nice use of rose gold pink, right? Charlotte Tilbury, of course, is an industry standard, and Pillow Talk is one of her most successful collections. It has a cult following. People love this product. And of course, the term Pillow Talk implies this allure and this sexiness. So choosing to incorporate rose gold and pink felt very fitting when we think of the connotations around women and sexuality in the color pink. Moving on to Bergdorf Goodman. So on the left, we see their holiday 2019 campaign. It was called Bergdorf Goodies, and it was a visual feast of fantastical desserts. So you can't have a dessert campaign and not include the color pink, right? And for me, this was such a fun use of pink, right? When I think of pink treats, like if I'm at a fair or a carnival, the first thing I want is cotton candy, right? On a cone, just light and fluffy like a little cloud, right? And cotton candy is artificial and fluffy and fun and sweet. So when you pair that with opulence and decadence of the portrayal of French royal court behind you, it feels very like you could almost taste the window, right? You can almost smell the sugar in the window, and you can almost taste that specific cotton candy colored pink, right? The look in the center is Rodarte, and that to me is super reminiscent of Bergdorf Goodman's interpretation of what a modern day Marie Antoinette would have looked like, right? And she, of course, was the queen of decadence. On the right, we see Benjamin Shine. This was an art installation, a collaboration with Bergdorf and Benjamin Shine, and he uses this soft tool in coral and magenta to construct these portraits of women. So it's hard to tell from the photo, but if you saw this in person, it was so beautiful and impressive because what you're looking at is soft material, and it's all soft sculpture. So it's amazing to me how anyone can build something so specific out of materials like that. Moving on, we have Dior choosing to use metallic, to incorporate metallic and silver into their interpretation of pink with mosaic. And then on the right, Burberry in collaboration with Printemps. And this installation on the right was to celebrate sort of both institutions' iconic use of color, right? Burberry is known for their beige, and Printemps is known for their soft pink. So if you look at the carpet, they've sort of created two worlds meeting together. The TB that is monogrammed onto the carpet is for Thomas Burberry, Burberry's founder, and you can find the logo throughout the entire space. They've chosen to use black as their complementary color. Black and white, of course, always go really beautifully with pink if you're not using it with other tertiary colors. And then moving on, we've got hot pink. So we've got our back to school on the top left corner. On the bottom right or bottom left corner, we have the Trolls. This was an installation that was done for the Trolls film when it first launched. The lead troll is Poppy, and she is voiced by Anna Kendrick, and she is a little pink troll, right? And if you're wondering, is her love interest blue? Absolutely, right? So even subliminally in children's entertainment, we're reinforcing the idea that pink is feminine and blue is masculine, right? So you can see that here in a really sort of fun, young way. And then on the right, we have just nice pink stripes, and again, a nice use of clean pink and white, and with little pops of yellow to give it a little pizzazz. Let's take a look at some pink interiors. So, pink is like not so much like a particular shade, almost like it is like a spectrum, right? So every color has a spectrum, but what's interesting about pink is that the deeper the spectrum and the more the saturation, the more people tend to not like it. The softer it is, the more people find it sort of palatable. So Gucci, using this shocking pink and coral in their entire store. It's fresh. When it's in this kind of 360-degree scope, you either love it and accept it as a neutral, or you immediately leave the store, right? It's polarizing. And what's great, I think, about Alessandro Michele's entire vision for Gucci is that it's one of gender androgyny, and he is always turning the industry in a sort of new direction, right? He's always sort of setting a standard. I think that's why we find Gucci so tantalizing right now, right? We never know what Alessandro is going to do next, and it's a really he's just this really great, fantastic disruptor, and it's really fun to see him take a house that has such a deep-rooted history and kind of really push the envelope with how he uses color. And I think these stores and their interiors are great examples of that. So this one's very calming, right? So this is champagne pink, and this entire space is built to be this calming haven, right? The products are color coded, giving this space a sense of order, right? And the lighting is very soft. It's meant to keep the space warm and inviting, and I think that they definitely achieve that, right? There's something, again, like I said, the higher the saturation of pink, the more we're kind of shocked by it, and the lighter it is, the more it's very calm and relaxed. Another great example of pink on the interior. This is the Monkhouse Design, which is a brand from Melbourne, Australia. And I like that they use multiple different shades of pink in their design concept, right? Salmon, champagne, blush, millennial pink. We see this like pink interior on a massive design scale, right? And they gives the space depth, it gives the space dimension through the use of all of these different shades. And again, while it is ultra feminine, there's something very neutral about it, right? And we've seen this big surge of pink in retail spaces. It's almost like no longer like considered like a highlighted color, but more of a neutral or a basic in a design element, because we're seeing it so much in all of these different spaces. So those are some interiors. Yes, Giovanni, I love this store too. It's fantastic. It's so beautifully thought out, right? The architecture and the color, it's just lovely. Let's take a look at some Marc Jacobs and his bright Barbie pink. You know, Marc Jacobs as a person is someone who is very bold, very loud, very unapologetic. So Pepto-Bismol pink to me is a genius color for his pop-up. This is also was a temporary space in Soho, and to stand out, you know, when you have a pop-up, you're there for a limited amount of time. So you're hoping that your marketing is doing all the moving and shaking to get people there, but really, I mean, direct contact with the consumer can work just as well. And the use of color is really smart, right? If you've been to Soho, nothing is this bright pink, right? All of these beautiful buildings are this classic brick, and we see cobblestone on the street, but this use of that bright pink was really smart in getting people through the door. And it had a great sense of humor, right? Again, pink is not a color that we quote unquote take seriously. So in this way, I think it's really fun and really wacky. They also, for the opening, if you notice on the left photo, they pulled out the glass so that their performer could go ahead and be heard on the street. All right, Victoria's Secret pink. So remember the corset that I showed you from 1880 at the beginning of this live? So this is a modern day interpretation of that corset, right? Victoria's Secret loves pink so much that they named their lingerie and apparel sub-brand after the color. And Pink by Victoria's Secret is this mecca for their target demographic, which is girls and women between the ages of 15 to 22. But why are they so successful, right? Why is this brand domestically so big when others may have, better sizing options or whatever it is, offer something different, right? And primarily it's their use of color, right? Their color is their muse. They call themselves pink and they reinforce what culturally we already interpret pink to be, right? Girly, pretty, fun, feminine. And as per their websites, if you look up what the Victoria's Secret pink girl is, she is, according to them, sexy, fun, healthy, a fantasy, and passionate, right? And these are all descriptors that have been used to describe the color pink for centuries. So they really understand why people would gravitate toward this. They also market very smartly, right? They have this bus campaign called Pink on Campus. It's their Pink on Campus program. They tour the country to enroll Victoria's Secret pink Instagram brand ambassadors and provide all kinds of apparel, right? So for spring break and collegiate gear. So they're always crowdsourcing, which is very smart for them. And they really, really understand their identity and where they fit into the sort of spectrum of what pink is and how it can be commoditized towards women. So another interpretation of pink, on the left we have the holiday collection, just like Bergdorf Goodman did holidays with candy, right? Saks also did a holiday campaign called The Land of a Thousand Delights, and it was all around the idea of candies and sweet treats. And here we see pink rock candy, and we see this beautiful Marchesa gown that is meant to look fluffy like cotton candy. So again, the association of sweetness and pink. And on the right, so every October, we see a flood of pink. We see it in our windows, in our retail spaces, on social media for Breast Cancer Awareness Month, right? Here we see Saks's campaign. This is Key to the Cure. And this essentially raises funds for women's health initiatives. And like political activism, there is this sort of shared recognition that pink can not only be powerful and feminine, but it can also be strong and a statement. So it's worn in solidarity of the perseverance of women through disease and through turmoil. So that's sort of why pink was adopted as the color of the breast cancer and breast cancer awareness movement. And we see it a lot during October. Here is the Give Pink, Get More campaign from Bloomingdale's, again, using a lot of pink both in their clothing, in their messaging, in their branding. And of course, the Pink Pony by Ralph Lauren. So Ralph Lauren has gone so far as to, the only time they ever change that logo of that horse is during the month of October, when they change it to their Pink Pony for the Pink Pony Fund, which again is a philanthropical effort of Ralph Lauren to donate money to breast cancer awareness foundations. This was at the store on Fifth Avenue, which unfortunately is no longer there, but it was a beautiful space, and they lit the entire thing up pink, and you can see that giant pink horse in the background, and that campaign revolves around the idea of solidarity and togetherness in pink. So another place we're starting to see pink pop up is wellness spaces. So it's interesting because society is like increasingly moving away from the idea that pink is childish or it's over sexualized, and we're beginning to see this like generational rebrand, right, with this idea of millennial pink, and we think of it as this neutral, right, and it's becoming very present in our wellness spaces, our spas, our salons, our gyms, right. This is a great example. It's the Recess pop-up. Recess is a wellness beverage brand. There's CBD infused sparkling water. And when they opened their pop-up, it was Recess IRL, so Recess in real life. And they designed it to be like millennial and cool and sort of relaxing. And usually we associated relaxation with the color blue, because when you think of the color blue, you think of the ocean and the sky, right? But pink is sort of fusing into that medium, and we're seeing it a lot more. On the right, we've got the Chill House, which is, they call themselves a destination for modern self-care, and this is that peachy pink color. So again, you start to see it does have little pops of course, blue. You can see them in there, but you start to see pink become this neutral territory for relaxation. Over here, this is a beautiful K-Beauty cosmetic store that also has a spa treatment facility. It's called Villa de Mûrir, and it's it's just exactly what I think of when I think of millennials. I'm like, oh, if they designed a spa, this is what it would look like, right? So while it is, I don't particularly see this space as feminine, but it is like very neutral. Pink almost just fades into the background as this just like giant palette of relaxation. This space on over here is located in New York City. It's called the Pink Moon Spa, right? And again, we always associated spas with the color blue, right? You'll always find, generally, we'll find spas have soft blue lighting, right? To sort of relax, lower the blood pressure, make you feel a little sleepy, which then in turn, releases some dopamine, so you're feeling nice. This specific spa is tailored to women specifically, so they may have kept that, gender coded for that reason, but I think their use of pink here is really neutral and smart. I mean, it's funny because I asked someone recently, I showed them this photo and I was like, what do you think this space is? And the first thing they said, oh, a nail salon. And I was like, well, not quite, but it is in that same arena, right? We're making those associations. And we're going to end with a look at some art galleries and museum spaces. So this space, I mean, it doesn't get any more, I mean, there's really nothing to say, right? It's just pink, move on. But this is Danish artist Nina Holmgren, and she created this site-specific sound installation, which was based on aquatic noises. So all of those lamps in the background actually give off this really cool sound, and it's supposed to entice both femininity and repel you. So it's exactly what we feel when we think of this color, right? You're supposed to both feel like something is inherently womanly or girly, and also be sort of repulsed by that idea that we would put that in such a box, right? So it's unpredictable, and the space is supposed to do that to you. So you're supposed to walk into this art gallery and feel very much strong feelings, whatever it is. That's the great thing about art, it is that it's always subjective, so it can be interpreted in a million different ways. Dior. So Dior always, Christian Dior himself loved pink. He considered pink was in the palette for Dior from when he first started designing, all the way up into their subsequent creative directors have always put pink into their sort of zeitgeist as a brand, right? But this installation on the right was their Miss Dior campaign. So for the relaunch or the launch rather, of their Miss Dior fragrance, they had this really beautiful pop-up experience that happened worldwide. This was for the Shanghai opening. So that beautiful sort of pink dress is in the center, and it's surrounded by all of these soft pink bottles of their fragrance. And then you walked through this really cool tunnel, and the tunnel was of pink light, right? And on the left, we have the Dior pop-up space. This was, we talked about this when we talked about oversized props, but this was the brainchild of Kim Jones when he was creative director of Dior Men's, and it was a collaboration with KAWS. Those little pink KAWS monsters were all throughout the spaces. This was a global, worldwide campaign. Yeah, it was pretty amazing. So of course, I can't talk about this color without talking about one of my favorite Met exhibits of the past 10 years. My personal favorite was always the McQueen Savage Beauty, but camp is right up there. And to be honest, no one, I went to this exhibit 3 times and had multiple discussions and sat through multiple sort of talks about it, and no one can really agree on what the aesthetic sensibility of camp means, right? But what was very evident is that camp is pink, right? And the color pink is camp, right? And Camp Notes on Fashion, which is a nod to Susan Sontag's famous essay, right, on the aesthetic. She described it as a love of the unnatural, of artifice, of exaggeration, right? And that's pink, right? It's campy and tacky and weird and pretty and soft. And so I love that while the pieces in throughout the exhibition were not exactly, didn't necessarily tie into the idea of pink. They did and they didn't. The mannequins were pink. The walls were pink. If you watched the Met Gala that year, the carpet was pink, right? So if you watch Lady Gaga strip down to like 5 different outfits, right? She did a burlesque show with this beautiful pink gown that went down to some lingerie, right? There was a lot of pink that year on the pink carpet because it is such a campy color. And in conjunction with that, Bergdorf Goodman did these companion piece windows, right? And of course, Bergdorf Goodman, they are like the kings of creativity, right? They're really beautiful at upcycling things that they have in their warehouse and repurposing it. And I can't describe camp any more than I can look at these windows and say that's what camp is. And also, a really great, if you couldn't describe the color pink to someone, show them this and then they'll hopefully start to understand it, right? So these were really beautiful companion piece windows that went along with the Met Gala exhibit, and they usually do this every year, which is really fun to sort of see it on Fifth Avenue and then walk up 20 blocks and see the exhibit at the Met. Moving on to the explosion, I call this Millennial Disney World, the Museum of Ice Cream, which capitalized on the phenomenon of pink, right? And this is again one of these spaces that we call an Instagram factory. You walk in with your phone fully charged and your outfit and your makeup, and you are ready to take photos. And this is a great example of how pink can incorporate the trope or the idea of being young and childish and silly, but also fun, right? They understand that pink is a fun, unserious color, so we're going to interpret it like that. We are going to have a sprinkle pool and a banana chair and, of course, ice cream, right? We can't call ourselves the Museum of Ice Cream without having that proprietary flavors. And what's interesting, I went to the very first Museum of Ice Cream when it opened in New York City, and it was such a big success that they closed it and then they toured it in San Francisco and LA and Miami, and now it's back in New York City and has a permanent residence because it's such a fixture of like Instagram and influencer culture, right? In the center, that's one of the founders, and she has, every time she's interviewed, I've read many interviews with her, and she's always like, well, I just took what already existed and gave the people what they wanted, right? So it's not rocket science, but it works, right? Sometimes the simplest solution is what's going to get people in the doors. Moving on to the Louis Vuitton X exhibition. So Louis Vuitton is definitely not a brand that I associate with the color pink at all, never in a million years. However, they decided for this exhibition to use bright, we call it Barbie pink, right? And Barbie pink is this kind of controversial color, right? It's part tacky and low end, which has been part of its image for like 100 years since Barbie started driving her pink Corvette and living in her pink Barbie dream house, right? But it's not just like feminine and childish. It has this artificial and fake quality, right? And that can be problematic, or it can be absolutely fabulous, like in this installation. So I think in this way, that hot pink, that shocking pink, that Barbie pink is used so smartly. And I know Nicole, one of our creative team members, went to this space, so I want to hear about your experience. But mind you, I should mention this, the entire space is not all pink, but there are rooms that are exclusively pink, and that big beautiful staircase, very LA, right? The tall palm trees, it just feels very grand and very decadent. And then finally, we end. If you want to educate yourself on any of this subject matter, as I have done, I'm so scholarly and I always love to learn. This exhibition, which is viewable online, you can actually watch some of the videos. They're fantastic, from the curatorial team over at FIT, at the Museum of FIT. This exhibit was fantastic in the way that I never thought I would be. I went to the exhibit and I thought pink. Well, I mean, how much could there be, right? Walking in very kind of blasé about the whole thing. And I walked out with this greater understanding that, 300 years of the lens of fashion in pink, and how we basically reframe this implicit bias that we have about this color, right? Like I said, we feel so strongly about this color, and how do we shift that narrative, and how do we look at it historically, right? What did it mean, right? How did we come to pink is for girls, blue is for boys, when really it used to be the opposite? And more so, there's not a color that should be specifically gender coded, right? Colors are for everyone. But this was a really beautiful and smart and historic look at a color. So if you are curious about exploring more on this subject matter, I highly recommend checking out their website, where you can learn more about that. Learn more about the pink exhibit, the history of punk, pretty, powerful color pink, right? All right, that does it for us. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off my screen shares, or my screen share rather, and we can take some questions. Actually, I'm going to leave that up because I know that that's helpful. All right. So let's see, Stacy, Peggy Portion in London is also very pink. Yes. That is a great, yes, another great, oh, thank you, Louise. Another great presentation. Yeah, like I said, there are so many examples. We could have been here for like 2 hours just looking at packaging, right? Or looking at interior spaces. There's a ton of great examples of that. But it's always fun to sort of to see different examples. Let's check out some Instagram. You haven't had a chance to visit the new location in Soho. So you're referring to, I think, the Museum of Ice Cream, right? Yeah, the Museum of Ice Cream has become so popular, and people will go dressed up in pink attire, or they'll go dressed up in like a neutral, like a yellow, so that they stand out in front of the pink, or white so they stand out in front of the pink. It's amazing how experiences like that, right? They call them like experience museums, have taken off, right? Millennial Disney Worlds, I'm telling you. The pink staircase at the Louis Vuitton exhibit. The pink staircase leads up to their pop-up shop in the museum. It was one of the biggest photo ops on purpose. Yeah, great point, Nicole. So I know you had gone to that space in LA, and I would imagine incorporating the idea of exit through the gift shop is huge, right? And you always want to give people a final moment to be able to take home a piece of the experience. So that's very, very smart of them. And chances are, I mean, we've talked about this before when we talk about never mind. I can't remember. My brain just went blank. Let's see. The Museum of Ice Cream is on my to-do list the next time I am in New York. It looks so fun. It is so fun, I think. And a very well-fashioned designer once told me at a shoot that whenever I was hungry or I didn't feel good, I should wear pink because it makes everyone's skin look better. Yeah, I feel like that depends on your skin tone, but I feel like it can. I mean, pink was originally the reason we found it so kind of alluring was because it did look like skin, right? The idea of a woman's blushing skin turned bright pink, right? So pink, um, I think everyone looks good in pink. It's one of those colors that's kind of neutral, right? You know how they sometimes say, like, if you have, red hair, you look great in green, right? Or if you have blue eyes, you look good in purple. Or pink is definitely a color that's very shareable and wearable, right? And again, I mean, in the 1950s, Brooks Brothers, I mean, they had always been building, all the way dating back to the 1920s, Brooks Brothers had been making pink shirts for men, dress shirts. It was just in the 1950s, there was like a resurgence of it, and pink again became very like masculine, right? Anyone else have any thoughts on anything? Sorry, I'm flipping between Instagram and Zoom so I can accurately see questions that are popping up. The WindowsWear party will hopefully be on your to-do list next time we see you in New York City, Louise. Yes, of course. Yeah, if you come back to New York City during January, come visit us at the WindowsWear party. Absolutely. So someone on Instagram said pink is the new black. It's very universal now. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I agree. It's become a color that is not used as an accent anymore as much as it's uh, used predominantly, right? So you can just you can color block with just the color pink. It's pretty amazing. Nice feedback. All right, folks, so we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Again, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. Let's do this, resume share, there we go. Thank you so much for being here. It's always so lovely to see all of your faces and to hear your feedback and to share these moments with you. Next Tuesday, to finish out Pride Month, we are going to take a look at LGBTQ representation in the retail industry. So we're going to take a look at some brands that are celebrating Pride and some brands that are redefining what that means. It's very exciting. So please join us next Tuesday. And this Thursday, we are going to have a couple of members of the Fendi team joining us. So this Thursday at 3 p.m., if you are around, it's a sort of once in a lifetime moment. Please join us for the Fendi team. Talking to us about some of their fantastic projects that they've got going on. So Thursday at 3 p.m. with Fendi, and next Tuesday at 3 p.m. with me, showcasing LGBTQ representation in the retail world. All right, everybody, have a fantastic afternoon. Thank you guys so much for joining us, and we will see you on Thursday, hopefully. Have a good one.